Hey, good morning, and thank you for joining us. So, my name is Siobhan Kinsella, and I serve at your pleasure as President of the Employment and Recruitment Federation. And I would like to firstly thank you for joining us and thank Contracting Plus, who make these Talent Talk briefings possible, and for you to attend with their generous sponsorship. Contracting Plus are key partners for many of our members involved in contract recruitment and sourcing. They offer quick and compliant setup for new contractors, provide contractor training and information sessions for your teams, and have in-depth insights and research on various sectors within the contracting industry in Ireland. If you're working with contract talent, please give Amy or Jimmy a shout, and Jen is also on the call too, so delighted to have them. Now, we are incredibly lucky today to be joined by David Kearney, who's the director of the HR Brief. By the way, David, if you need to contact him, if you have specific questions outside of the general information that Dave's going to provide today, his email is david@hrbrief.ie. So HR Brief are specialists in human resources, industrial relations, health and safety management, and data protection law, and have also developed a specialism in AI. Now, full disclosure, the ERF are a client of HR Brief, and I personally am a client of HR Brief. And I have to say, we've just received our full AI policy from HR Brief, and it is both scary and incredibly impressive, and the level of work and attention to detail included in it. So Dave has a degree in social science from UCD. He's a postgrad higher diploma in management, change management, human resources, and health and safety. And most recently, he's acquired an advanced diploma in data law from the Honourable Society of the King's Inn. So without further ado, I can't recommend Dave highly enough, and he is the guy who has kept me clean and out of the WRC for the last 8 years, for which I am eternally grateful. Dave, over to you.
Good morning. Thanks very much, Siobhan, for that very gracious. I think I should just employ you directly to promote us, but thank you very much. You're very, very kind, and thank you for your kind words. Good morning, everybody. As Siobhan has said, I'm David Kearney. I know many of you who are on the call, and like an undertaker, sometimes people hate to see me coming because it's usually bad news. But I'm delighted this morning for the opportunity to go and maybe refresh and review this whole issue around permits and visas. Um, and I have to say, very honestly, from the outset, that it's way too early in the morning to be frightened the bejesus out of people at 9 o'clock. So we're going to take it as gently and softly as we can as we move along. But I need to be very frank and honest with you guys. The landscape has changed very dramatically in the last couple of years. So there was for a long time in Ireland this soft touch approach to visa and permit compliance. I've been involved in many WRC inspections over many years with clients, and a bit like the Garda, if you're stopped for certain road traffic offences, they have a discretion. They can stop you for tax, for example. And the law says your car must be taxed from day one, but you can pull out the glove compartment your application form to the tax for your renewal. And the guard has the discretion to not issue a summons or a fine. Um, but that discretion is gone. So there was a time that the inspectors would call, and if you haven't been inspected for a number of years, then you're operating on the old premise, which was sure, that was grand back then. That has all changed, guys. It is really now taken very, very seriously, and breaches are automatically prosecuted now. So there was a time, to be honest, you'd get around it, you'd cajole the inspector, you would come up with a dozen reasons why it happened and it won't happen again, and everything was honky dory. That day is gone, and it is something now that needs to be taken very seriously. A lot of CRM systems are not flagging when visas are due for renewal. They're not anticipating the changes, and a lot of people are operating on the previous understanding of how this worked. So that's what I want to make absolutely clear from the beginning. This whole landscape has changed very dramatically. The whole, if you like, the temperature has gone up around visas and immigration, and you can see it across Europe, you can see it across the world. So government are under huge pressure. First of all, they want people to come here. So that's really important to stress that, this critical skills ones in particular is a government policy to get people to come to Ireland to work and to live here indefinitely. That's actually the government stated policy. So that's why they streamlined that. That is the gold visa, as you know, it's the easiest one to get. And that's all intentional. That's not the issue. The issue is usually around the other ones, which we'll talk about. So you're operating in a scarce talent. You're going overseas because the talent simply isn't here. The government recognise that. They've made significant changes, particularly in the 2024 Act, and indeed last year, and indeed this year. There are rising costs. So watch the salary floors. Where a lot of people are getting caught out is on the basis of you make an offer, a job offer, it's the baseline offer. The client is saying, well, I only have to pay 40 odd thousand. I don't have to pay them anymore. But actually, that's increasing year on year up to 2030 at about 7%. So the job offer now at the baseline rate may not be applicable in 2 years' time when the renewal comes. So watch that in terms of building in your budgeting and your costing and advising clients that the government has set out a very clear pathway where they want these salary benchmarks to be increased roughly about 7% each year. Tighter rules. A lot of CRM systems are simply not protecting the business. A lot of junior consultants are left with the responsibility of ensuring compliance, and they don't understand it or its application. And it is a criminal offence. So let's be very honest and very clear here, guys. There are a lot of convictions going on which are under the radar. You're not hearing about them because they're being kept very low key by both the WRC, to be fair. But there are convictions in the district court, and the directors are convicted. They are fined and they hold a criminal record. So this is serious, serious stuff now that needs to be taken on board. The days of excuses are gone, and I didn't understand it. I didn't know the law is not an excuse anymore. It's never a defense in court. It's never ever, and Mary and I go to court about 3 times a week. It's never ever been accepted by a judge or a tribunal. So that's simply not. Anna, can you move on for me, please? So if there's one takeaway I want for this morning for you all is to understand that an employment permit is not an immigration permit. They're two different permissions. Two different government departments, two different processes. And this is where a lot of people are getting caught out. They think, well, if they have the employment permit, but sure, honky dory, everything is good to go. It's not the case. That's only the first piece of the jigsaw. The second piece of the jigsaw is the immigration. So I liken it to the employment permit is your right to work, your immigration permission is your right to come through the door. And they're different. And that's why you need two separate pieces of documentation, and they need to be in date. They need to correspond because there's a lot of fraud going on. They need to correspond, and you need those two pieces of documents, not just one. The permit is just the right. So really important. The Department of Employment, of Enterprise, Tourism and Employment are responsible for the employment permit. Immigration permit is the Department of Justice. And that's why there's often a disconnect. You can get on to the fast track with the employment permit section. Seems to work very well, this portal. And in a matter of weeks, you can have the permit. I know cases from South Africa, from different parts of the world. Remember, Irish government issued permits to over 160 countries. We have full embassies in some countries. We have consulates in other countries. Some are slower than others. I think in South Africa, it's taking up to 12, 14 weeks now. So really important you don't conflate the two. They're not the same timelines, different processes, different departments. Thanks, Anna. So the law has changed. In 2024, there was a Consolidation Act which replaced the original Employment Permits Act of 2003 and 2014. And that's kind of what a lot of us would have been operating in pre-COVID. And that's where a lot of us would have been used to this discretionary power that inspectors had. And we would kind of maybe lock ourselves into that mindset, but that has all changed since 2024. So on the 2nd of September 2024, the law changed. And as I said, it replaced the previous. And the important thing to remember here, this is a framework document. In other words, Typically, what happens in primary legislation is primary legislation takes forever to happen. It takes months and years for changes to happen. This is now set in regulation, and that means that this can change on a frequent basis. And that's why you need to stay in touch and stay on top of an ever evolving situation. So, so figures and lists change far more often than the previous. So the previous acts were kind of set in stone. Once you got used to them, you were familiar with them. This act is a regulation-based act, which means the minister can issue regulations on an ongoing basis, which he or she does, and that means the conditions can change on an ongoing basis. Thanks, Anna. So, what changed in 2026? Thanks, Anna. So this is the golden visa, the critical skills. Remember, this is an intentional government policy to attract in highly skilled, high-end individuals and their families, by the way, with a view to staying in Ireland, to settling in Ireland and staying long term. And that's why this visa is often considered as the gold visa. So that is for high demand occupations on the critical skills list. There's no labour market test required. That's really crucial, and I know it's very happy. The route to stamp 4 after 2 years, family can join immediately and they can work immediately, which is the 1G, which is really fantastic. So here's the opportunity for you. You could land a nice juicy placement with a critical skills, but then you might get family members who can join who are also tend to be highly skilled people who would have sat at home for a long time previously, but now they can work and they can come apply to the agency. They can be temporary agency workers, and you can put them on placement pretty much immediately, no restrictions. And that's really good news, I think, in terms of your prospects of maybe getting a multiple of placements. Okay. And then there's so sorry, Anna, would you just go back to the critical skills one for me, please, if you don't mind? Thanks very much. So watch the ceiling there, guys. You can see it's changed. It's 40,000, and allow for that 5, 6, 7% increase year on year. So important to say to the employer, this is not fixed indefinitely here. There is an intentional pathway to increase these each year. So there is a cost. And then you can see the 68.9. That's without agree, but that's people who can prove experience. And I know it's almost counterintuitive in the way it's set out. Okay. The general employment permit, this is probably the one that's most frequently used now and is beginning to become more prevalent in the workplace because the government are recognizing every week now they're getting representations from employment bodies trying to broaden out the scope for the critical skills list. When is the last time you actually looked at the critical skills list or you looked at the general employment list? Because it's changing all of the time. So they're adding additional categories, like recently there was new pharmaceutical engineers. There was all kinds of different categories of workers that heretofore were ineligible to apply. They are now being put on the list. They're also focused like 1,000 bus drivers, like 600 articulated drivers, like 1,500 social care workers. That changes when that list is expunged. In other words, when that quota is reached, that permit application is withdrawn. So really important, you're checking in on the website, which is forever changing, and you're becoming familiar with on an ongoing basis, certainly monthly, on the new skills list that have been adopted by the government and approved. Watch the market test, guys. Everyone's getting caught out on this one, okay? The market test for the non-critical skills, this is the general employment permit. This is the workhorse of our economy in terms of inward permits. The market test must be up for continuous 28 days, not taken up, taken down, re-put up again. 28 continuous. There are two portals that it must apply to. I'll talk about that in just a second. It is the permits that most employers, and it is the one that the list has most increased and enhanced on in recent months in particular, particularly around construction, who are chronically short of skilled workers at the time. So watch the minimum salary there. It's 36. Now that cannot be made up. And this is where people are getting caught out, guys. This cannot be made up by overtime, by commission, by benefits. This has to be a base salary stated in the contract at 36,605. That's the base salary. Now, at a case recently where an employer was bringing in people on these general employment permits, a lot of them had difficulties with the English language, which is fair enough. And he paid for the permits. So he paid for all of the permits and then stopped the money from their wages. Okay. Now they all agreed it's illegal. You cannot do that. Client cannot do that. Really important you realize that. You cannot get into an arrangement where the permit, if the client is applying for the permit, they must pay for it. It cannot be a clawback arrangement. If the individual is applying, that's their own business. That's fair enough. So watch this and watch it on the renewal. What's happening is a lot of clients are using this as a means to retain talent. Remember, they can leave after 9 months, and they're saying is, well, I want the 1,500 back, whatever it was, and I'm going to stop. So you have to keep working for me for the next 6 months so you can pay me off. That is illegal. It is not allowed. And I can tell you now, there's been a number of companies have been penalized. So watch that. Do not let the client tell you that this is okay, because it's not okay and it's not acceptable. Okay. Next slide there, Anna. Thank you. So the labour market needs test is not required for the critical skills. Okay. And that's really important. The general is always, there are exceptional circumstances where the minister may agree boners in the meat industry or pickers for Keelings or whatever. But they are very rare and they are very specific. So generally speaking, you've got to accept that there will be a labour needs market needs test, and that's to ensure that there's an integrity around the system, but also that if there are Irish people or European Union nationals who can apply for this work, then they should be entitled to do so. Salary floor, you can see, has changed. Long-term residence, and this is the big attraction for the general critical skills, is the stamp for after 2 years. General is after 5 years. And then the family with you, really big selling point here for the critical skills one is immediately, and they get a stamp 1G. It's a year, as you know, with the general employment. Again, 1G just all takes a little bit longer. And with the general employment one, they've got to prove that they can sustain the family. They will not allow a situation where whole families come over under the general employment scheme and then they become dependent on the state. Remember, and this is a crucial point, none of these permit holders can access our services. People think they cannot. So again, as part of the negotiations with the client, you need to talk about health insurance. You need to look at provisions. I had a case recently where a guy was denied benefits because they were told he was on probation for 6 months. So he was sold this pup where he had all these benefits, these health benefits, and all of the rest. He moved here, lock, stock, and barrel. He became unwell and was told, well, actually, you didn't do your 6 months probation, so therefore the benefits don't kick in. So again, fine detail, have those conversations. Now, if people have travel insurance, so again, make sure that your candidates have travel insurance. They're covered for at least 12 months while they're here, and then they can sort out their own private insurance. But again, make sure they're covered. Just small details like that are really important to people, especially if their families come here and all of a sudden children become unwell and they are not entitled to the services of the state. Just be clear on that. That happens after a period of time where they get their long-term residency or they get their application to apply after the 2 years and the 5. But prior to that, and it's a misnomer out there that people think happens, it doesn't happen. They are not entitled to the services of the state. So watch their back on this. Push the client, make sure the benefits are not contingent on a 6 month contract, make sure they're not contingent on certain conditions. If they're offering health insurance as part of the package, it's a day one entitlement that you need to make sure is covered. Okay. So thanks very much, Anna. Thanks very much. So you can see the list of just giving you an example of categories that have been added to the critical skills. And it's changing all the time. You've got to keep checking it. It is changing absolutely all the time, which is great news. It opens and broadens it out. I remember a time in Ireland, a lot of the permits were limited to a chef from a part of China that they couldn't get, the Chinese restaurant couldn't get, or an Indian restaurant couldn't get. And they were very specific and very limited. I mean, this thing is vast now. It runs into multiples of um, categories, which is fantastic. And it's changing all of the time. Several other roles came off the ineligibility. So dental and pharmaceutical technicians, fantastic. Again, great news. And then there's new quota-based openings in care, construction, and agri-food. Now, quota means the minister, on the recommendation of the department, decides that X amount will come in this year for picking, for example, in the fruit sector, and that could be 500. But when that 500 is gone, you know, the ad for the stuff, it's often the furniture and the barbecue, that when it's gone, it's gone. When these are gone, they're gone. So don't get yourself into a campaign unless you've checked the quotas are still available. And maybe the biggest trick, one of the biggest takeaways there is register with the portal. Be ready to go. Don't be wasting valuable time. Remember, the market skills test is already 4 weeks of dead time, 28 days gone before you can even apply. So you cannot apply for the permits during that period. Waste of time, it'll be rejected, and you'll have to start all over again. You must extinguish the 28 days, then you make the application, and the application must be made within 90 days. Remember that, okay? Can't leave it drift along. It's got to be done. Okay. So new quota-based openings in care, construction, agriculture. Thanks, Anna. So understanding the stamps, okay? Yeah, next one, Anna. Thank you. So stamp one, guys, you're all familiar with this one. Work tied to an employment permit. Um, Stamp 1G. Now watch the 1G one, because the 1G is primarily around our Brazilian friends, by and large, who came here to study on Stamp 2. Stamp 2 is not a work permit. Stamp 2 is an education permit. Never to be confused. It is not a work permit. They're entitled to work for periods of time while they're here, but they're primarily here to study. That's the basis of the permissions. Permission to study, permission to live. Department of Justice give them permission to enter and live. Department of Enterprise give them permission to study, to come and study. Lots of them. 70,000 Brazilians currently living in Ireland. Huge workforce. And thank God we would have all starved to death during COVID only for them, because they all did the Deliveroo's and the Just Eat and everything else, and we would have been lost without them, Mr. Truth. They are experts on our permit system and work system. There's nothing they don't know. Just like the Irish abroad, I assume, we became experts very quickly when we emigrated, and this group are particularly good. They'll give you all kinds of stories that the college finished early, that they're applying for a different course. They've left this course, they fell out with the tutor. It doesn't matter. The responsibility to ensure compliance under the Permits Act always rests with the employer and the agency, never the client, never the candidate. You can't turn around and say, well, it's their problem. He didn't tell me, he didn't let me know, he gave me a letter from the college. Remember, guys, there are only 2 periods that Stamp 2 can work, and it's laid down in law, okay? Only 2 periods. 1st of June to September, December to January, set out in law. Everything else is complete rubbish. It doesn't exist. And here's where a lot of people are getting caught out. They can only work a maximum of 20 hours during the college term, and they can only work a maximum of 40 hours during that period which they're allowed to work. Not 40 hours plus overtime, 40 hours period. Really important. A lot of you guys are getting caught out on this one, okay? They convert, there's 2 categories of Stamp 1G around Stamp 2, and that's the level 8 and the level 9. The level 8 is 12 months. They're always extended to 24 months. Then the level 9 is 4 months. So just watch it. Great permit. No limit to what you can do in terms of placements. no requirements around it. But again, just watch the stamp two. If I'm honest with you, it's the one that everybody is getting caught out on. And this notion then that people's stamps are expiring, and then you're looking for this 12-week grace period, and this grace period then people are saying, well, can they work during the, well, they can't work during the grace period. They can't work during the grace period unless they can prove they applied for renewal before the renewal date. Does that make sense? So really watch your back one on this one, okay? I've had 5 prosecutions last year under stamp twos for this very reason. So the grace period doesn't exist in law. It's not actually in the legislation. It is something that the minister grants on the recommendation of the various departments to say, we have a major backlog here. We are having real difficulty processing. We need an extension here, Minister. So many of us will know it started off at 2 weeks, then it went to 4 weeks, then it went to 6. It's now 12 weeks. But if that inspector walks in and it asks you that question, when is their visa expire? Well, it expired 2 weeks ago. Okay, but they have a 12-week grace period. Yeah, but when did they apply for the renewal? Oh, I think they reply. I think they're applying now. Oh no, no. So why are they still here? Why are they working? They don't have permission to work. So watch your back on this, guys. Don't get caught out. I know it's very tempting when clients are putting you under pressure operationally. They're saying, look, whatever, you're trying to find a workaround. There is no workaround. The law is very clear. It's black and white. Okay. Stamp two, they're the ones that everyone's getting hammered on. I won't lie to you. Okay. Stamp four, no issue. Sure, it's fantastic. You get a stamp four, happy days, you're home and dry. You work freely for any employer. Stamp one, I want to talk to you a little bit about stamp one if I can. And again, watch this. The critical skills makes an assumption that there's an offer of 2 years and they have to stay 9 months with the employer. I had a call 2 weeks ago from a lady who is only here a few weeks and very, very highly qualified, accomplished, professional young woman who is being sexually harassed in the workplace. She's only there a few weeks. Boss has told her if she behaves in a certain way towards him that she will do very well in the company. And this girl is terrified. She doesn't want to cause any trouble because she thinks, because remember, and it's also important to remember, a lot of countries that people come to work in Ireland are not used to our laws in the sense that they don't trust them. They often come from regimes where the law is corrupt, where the police force is corrupt, where the legal profession is corrupt, and they're not used to trusting people with information. They won't voluntarily come forward. They don't want to cause, the common thing is, we don't want to cause any trouble. We don't want to lose our visa. This guy has threatened me if I don't do certain things, he's going to revoke my visa. So important that you're minding candidates, important that people feel they have access and a trust. If people do ring and say they're being sexually harassed, you ring on Garda Síochána, you tell them that this is a criminal offence and they are protected and their visa is protected. Okay. Can you sack someone on a stamp? Well, the answer is yes, you can. The same as any employee. They come under the employment framework. If they misbehave, or indeed if they don't satisfy the probation period, some people can uh, spoof it or bluff it till they make it, is the truth of it. They get here and then the client finds out, well, that's not exactly what I thought I was getting here. So can they be sacked? Can they be removed? Can the contract be ended? The answer is yes. In the same way it's done with any other employee. Can people be made redundant? Yes, they can be made redundant. So situations can change. Donald Trump wakes up tomorrow and decides to invade somebody else, and a big client decides, oh no, we're not going ahead with that. Person is here, visa is withdrawn in the sense that the job offer is gone. So again, there's complexities in it, but be aware people have rights, employers have rights, and it's about seizing the opportunity to then get this person placed. Remember, people can be placed 3 times in that visa regime after 9 months, all things being equal and fair. But if contracts need to be terminated, then the department needs to be notified within 28 days. So they need to notify the department, and you need to advise the client to do likewise. The department will take it from there, and people are generally given up to about 6 months to get other employment. Again, that might be an opportunity for you because here's someone who has a permit, who has a visa, and you may be able to act as that intermediary to get them placed. It might be through no fault of their own. Again, the department have to be notified and a new contract has to be issued. Thanks, Anna. So, so the one around the hire that might help you is many partners are on stamp 3, no right to work unless they secure their own permit. So since May 2024, you can see the categories of permit holders, and they can work without a separate permit. Now, there are challenges. I won't lie to you that I've had situations where a marriage has broken down and the primary partner was the holder of the critical skills, and then the second partner, male, female, had the 1G, and the marriage broke down, the relationship broke down because they don't happen in marriages, you know. A primary partner is someone who's classified who can justify or satisfy the department that they've lived together for at least 2 years. So they don't have to be married. But relationships break down, things happen, people go into other relationships. What happens to the visa holder of the 1G? Well, they're taken in their individual context by the department. But again, they're tricky issues that you need to get advice on. They're not straightforward. These things are never, ever straightforward. Thanks, Anna. Go again, Anna. Thank you. So remember, everything runs through this EPOS system. So this is the market test. You need to register. Okay, so you have an employer, employee, and an agent. There's a multi-factor. It's a really good, clever website. Actually, I don't know many of us but have been using it up to now. There was a couple of teething problems at the start, but in general, it seems to be working really, really well. Set the employer account up before you have a candidate waiting. So it's all about time. It's all about the pressure of time for the client to get the space filled. I remember famously when I came into this world of recruitment many years ago, and I met a very famous recruiter who's deceased now, Lord rest her, and she was just amazing. I mean, I was so determined to show off how much I knew about the law and compliance and immigration, and I think I bored the pants off her within 10 minutes. But I thought, God, she's really going to be so impressed with me here, how much I know and how much I'm going to protect her and mind her business. And what she said to me was, she said, Dave, that's all very well, but she said, the fact of the matter is, I'm only interested in filling the booking. I'll worry about the paperwork afterwards. And for a long time, for a long, long time, that was very much the situation. That day is gone. I keep saying this, guys, because I really know a lot of you work very hard to make a go of the business, and you just don't want to be caught now on this stuff, and you don't want to be handing out easy money or find yourself in the district court on a criminal conviction, which means you won't be able to travel to the United States and stuff like that. So it has real implications for the business. Okay. But this comes the old trusted. Some of you may have used the old trust or partner fast track. That no longer runs in the previous format. So again, you just need to be familiar. And a lot of this is about I suppose refreshing your own understanding concept of how this works now as opposed to how it used to work. It might be a couple of years since you've done some of these, or you might be doing it just routinely and haven't gone in to check, is there a new, well, there is a new system, there is a new methodology. Everything is on the portal now, everything is done electronically. Thanks, Anna. So this is the labour market needs test. It's now digital, guys. So you advertise online, you go on to jobsireland.ie plus one other online. So two platforms. One is compulsory, that's the Jobs Ireland. That then is across the European network. That guarantees that the market needs test is met. The other one I need to mention to you is this 50-50 rule. So again, a lot of people are getting caught out. It's the headcount that you need from the client. So you need to watch this 50%, You cannot go above 50% of permit holders within any one client. Okay. And that is strictly enforced. So watch the 50-50 rule, get that accurate information as part of your briefing, as part of the campaign. Get as much data as you can so you feel comfortable that you're not jeopardizing a relationship with your client because you didn't know and the client expects you to know everything. Of course they do, because you're a recruitment agency. It's always your fault. It's always your responsibility. You must run it for 28 days continuously. That's what the Act says, okay? And then you apply. You only apply after 28 days. So not during it, not day 27, 28 days, because you must give evidence of the advertisement as part of the application. And that's why the 28 days is dead time. Okay. Thanks, Anna. So there is faster mobility. People can change after 9 months. They can change before 9 months in different circumstances. The great thing is once you've done the market needs test, there's no need for another one if they're going into the same sector. Okay. They can make 3 moves um, in that period, but they must start within 1 month of a new permit. That's this 28-day rule thing. And the department must be informed because they want to track where people are. That's the whole purpose. So it's all about relationship and respect with the client, respect with the candidate, but also relationship and respect with the two government departments you're dealing with, the Department of Immigration, or Department of Enterprise, Tourism and Employment, and the Department of Justice. That's how you build up a reputation with these people. If you get into a sticky situation or there's a delay or an issue, you will be flagged as what's called a trusted partner. And that's all based on relationship. Okay. Remember, retention is important. It's important that your client understands these people need to be treated fairly. They need to be treated respectfully because they won't retain them if they don't. And they've spent time and money getting these people into the country, getting them into their workforce, and they've got to treat them as if these were their full-time employee, not based on a 2-year rolling contract, but really invest, give them the same benefits, same conditions as everybody else. Remember, we've the Pay Transparency Act. We have all different kinds of acts now, which make all these things really, really important and transparent. You know, the days of secrecy within pay within the workforce is gone. You have to advertise the job now and advertise the rate of pay. So again, if you've got two comparators, if you've got somebody going in on the baseline, if you've got somebody going in on the baseline, then they go in and find that someone else, their comparators have been paid more. You're not going to retain them. They're going to move on, especially if they're in the critical skills category. Thanks, Anna. Okay. So again, when we talk about budgeting in terms of understanding the cost base, you can see where the previous one was. You can see how it's jumped from the 1st of March. Remember, it's a floor. It's not the market rate. So it's important you establish the market rate for the job, not just the client saying, "Oh, I have to pay 36. I have to pay 40. I have to pay 49. I have to pay 32." Now, the 32, as you know, is for the care sector and the meat sector. Lower threshold in terms of qualifying here, but they're specific to those sectors, and their conditions are clearly set out in the application. Again, that just reflects the general pay level. But you've got to allow for this increase. The government have committed to increasing this on average 7% over the next couple of years up to 2030. So again, the client needs to be aware. If you lock in a contract, it's going to change. You can see it here. So it's a phased roadmap to 2030. They're saying it averages around 7.7%. You need to build that into your budget in terms of your explanation to the client on their expectations of salary going forward. Again, make sure as best you can it's the market rate and not the baseline here, because that's where a lot of clients are getting caught out. And then they're finding people won't stay because there's a comparator within the workplace that they find out very quickly. Thanks, Anna. Quotas can change, guys. So you can see there's one there, nearly 1,500 in the care worker section, 1,000 for motor mechanic roles, and 100 for seafood operatives. That changes every couple of weeks. Got to stay on top of this. Got to make sure if a client comes on looking for a number of people in different sectors that actually the quota is there or there's no limit to the permits. Could be you guys are getting caught out on this, getting into campaigns and then finding actually the quota is gone or mostly gone, or by the time the applications are made, it's gone. Okay. Thanks, Anna. So this is the frightened to be Jesus out of you a bit. The law requires you, the agency, the employer, to ensure that people are compliant. It is not down to the client, it is not down to the candidate. Now, the candidate will suffer the consequences. The client will suffer reputational damage and relationship with you as a trusted partner in this space. But it is an offence, and it is a criminal offence to knowingly engage somebody that does not have a valid permit. That's what the Act says, okay? And the permit and the penalties are obvious, up to 250,000 fines, imprisonment in extreme. And we've had agencies shut down, guys. I mean, don't be naive. There are bad actors out there that are not doing this industry any service, I can tell you. But they're getting caught. They're getting weeded out. A few of them last year, a couple from overseas, couldn't care less about compliance, doesn't really apply to them in their minds. They were shut down. Garda vetting has moved on a number of people last year. So there is a focus on the sector. There is a continuing engagement with the sector in relation to compliance. WRC inspectors have no longer any room for discretion here. No longer. It is an automatic penalisation if you are caught in breach of the Permits Act. So I would urge you, please, from today, to go talk to your compliance people, ensure your CRM systems are robust, that they're recording and flagging in lots of time when permits are due to expire, that communication is made with the candidate to ensure that they've made the application in a timely fashion. Do not sack anybody. Really important now. If you've got somebody on permits working away for a couple of years, they are protected by employment law, particularly the Unfair Dismissals Act. It's really important you don't get a rush of blood to the head and just say, okay, well, you're not working till I have the paperwork. And I understand that's a very reasonable response. However, it is going to lead you into all kinds of problems, particularly with the Unfair Dismissals Act, if you don't act reasonably and fairly. You've got to suspend people without pay in a letter that's setting out clearly why they're being suspended. And they're being suspended because the company has concerns that their permit and their residency is not valid, and therefore they do not have an eligibility to work. And as soon as they can rectify the situation and provide evidence to the company, to the country, then their employment will continue. But they will be suspended indefinitely. So suspended is the key word, guys. Not paid, but suspended. They are not dismissed. They're not put off the payroll system. They're not put off the login system. They're simply suspended. But that has got to be done by letter. Okay, setting out clearly why the suspension is happening, and ideally, setting out the term. So your visa expired on such a date, you didn't make the application, so you don't benefit from this famous grace period. This grace period of 12 weeks? Everyone thinks that that's a catch-all. It's not a catch-all. That is only applicable where you can prove you've made the application prior to the expiry, not afterwards. Afterwards is going to cause a major problem. And that's when you need to take affirmative action to protect your business, to protect your client, and indeed to protect the candidate by ensuring that they do not work unless they have a valid permit and residency. So, in other words, they need both, whether it's an IG that has a stamp on the back, whether it's on the passport. By the way, I was asked a question yesterday. You must retain copies of the passport of non-Irish and non-EU nationals for inspection. and the IR. So there are two documents that you must retain because the inspector can inspect any time and will look for those documents. I was asked a question most recently about Irish passports. You do not need an Irish passport to get a job. You can ask to see an Irish passport. You can take down the number of the Irish passport and you can record that you've seen the passport and have the number, but you can't keep a copy of the passport. It is illegal. The data commissioner has ruled it is excessive data collection. It is not appropriate to take people's passports. Okay. Highly, highly sensitive data for you to have control of as a data controller. So watch that one. ID can be about a driving license. It can be about a permit. It can be about whatever. That's you're verifying age, you're verifying nationality. That's all fine. But watch the passport. You must keep a passport for non-Irish, non-EU citizens. You're not allowed to keep a passport, particularly for an Irish citizen. It is not a legal requirement. And in fact, the Data Commissioner has ruled it is unlawful to do so. So just watch that one. Okay. We didn't realize, guys, is not a defense. I've never tried it in court. I've never come across a judge or a tribunal or an adjudication officer that ever accepts from any employer because you are company directors by and large. You're also covered by the Companies Act. There is an expectation that you know the law and you apply the law. And I didn't know or I didn't understand will never ever be accepted um, in a defence. Thanks, Anna. Watch this one on the timelines, guys. Everyone is getting called out on this one. Okay, so going back to this lady I met in recruitment years ago, all about filling the booking. I get that. All about getting the commission. All about building that relationship of trust with the client, developing this ongoing relationship for more opportunity for placements. And I know it's competitive, and I know it's a very pressurized moment to be in. But with the candidates, you've got to set realistic timelines and expectations about because they're two different departments, they operate two different structures. One tends to be quite fast, to be fair. Other seems to be struggle with workload, seems to struggle, but then it's more complex because we may have a full embassy in parts of South Africa where we only have a consulate in parts of Brazil, for example, or parts of South America. So there are challenges within the Department of Foreign Affairs, Department of Justice, they're all interlinked. It all takes time. Check the website, see what the most recent calculation is on time. Explain to them the permit versus permission. People get stopped at the borders. People get stopped at Dublin Airport. People get stopped in Cork Airport and they're refused admission. They don't have the documents with them. They don't have the supporting documents of the application. So if an immigration officer stops somebody who's flashing their permit and they say, well, where's your visa? Oh, that'll be here next week, I'm told. They're not going to be allowed in. So you've got to check and double check and tell them to bring things with them, bring a folder with them, put them in their carry-on luggage so they can put out a folder and show them the copies of the application. So everything is there. There's no issues. Remember, the travel insurance, if they don't have health cover as part of the package, they must have travel insurance to show the immigration officer, okay? Keep them informed. What I'm coming across is consultants are panicking. It's taking forever, and they're not going back to the candidates because they're afraid they're going to lose the candidates. But look, we all know it's but no news. If you hear nothing, we all assume, particularly the Irish anyway, we'll all assume the worst and would say, "Oh, Jesus, it must be a no, it must be whatever." You're better off to ring them, email them, and say, "Look, there's no news yet. Well, we're confident this will be okay. I want to ring the department again." Remember, they're talking to other people. The potential here is you could get a stream of potential candidates because of an experience I've had with your agency in terms of how you treated me as a candidate, that care, that extra mile that you go. And then that's fed back to the client because the clients now do interviews about the onboarding experience because everyone's looking at fees and cutting costs and why should they use agencies and so on. So it is about treating people with respect, but also being honest. We don't want to be just told that we can all cope once we know where we stand. But this vacuum of no information, this vacuum of sure it'll be grand, it'll be all right in the day, that doesn't cut it with candidates, particularly in the critical skills area. These are highly educated, mobile people, well used to being, particularly in India, because I worked in India. I mean, India is probably the most paper heavy society you could come across. There's 10 officials doing the job. You got to get 10 different stamps for one permit. So they're used to it. They understand it. It's part of their culture. It's not alien to them, so they won't be surprised by it. Remember, there's a massive Indian network here in Ireland. So people talk to each other. So, and else there, Anna. So, what to do? I would strongly recommend you set up your EPOS account now. Check the occupation list before each campaign and don't go to a lot of trouble that you then find isn't. It's going to make you look incompetent, but also it's going to burn up a lot of your resource that you don't frankly need to do. Start the advertising clock early. So have that ready to go. Have a couple of templates ready to go, particularly if you're in a particular sector, you know exactly. And you've got to advertise it exactly as you would advertise a job for an Irish person in an Irish situation. So, it can't be in the back of the Irish Times in Irish. This thing has got to be done properly, done online. First of all, with the government agency, which is Europewide, and then with one other platform, and you've got to show proof. What's your budget, guys, going forward? There is a built-in cost here in terms of renewals and an expectation of clients going forward about what that baseline looks like. And don't take any risks. If it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's a duck. Okay, go with your gut, protect the company, be cautious, be fair, but be cautious. Remember, this is a criminal offence, punishable in the district circuit court, and the directors will be fined. And in some extreme cases across Europe have been imprisoned. Now, I'm genuinely not trying to scare people, but I am genuinely trying to say this has changed, this is serious, and this is something now you've got to get on top on in terms of your management of the permits and the visas. I think we're okay, Anna, are we?
Dave, that was brilliant. Thanks a million. Now, just for everybody on the call, this is an awareness briefing. It doesn't constitute legal advice unless you're under contract or the HR brief. You cannot rely on specific legal advice with regard to a specific claim. But God bless you, in recruitment, we have some chancers. So I've gone through the questions. So a couple of things I just want to clarify with you, Dave, if that's okay.
Sure.
So when they're on a stamp 2G, um, there was chance this is going on years, right? So they've finally put it down in legislation what summertime is from the 1st of June to the 30th of September, and wintertime is the 15th of December to the 15th of January.
Yeah.
There were some questions on the call as to, oh, what if the college has different opening hours or
Yeah.
different time?
Nothing to do. It's a great question, and thanks for asking it, Siobhan. Let's be clear, guys. That is the statutory position. Nothing else is allowable. Nothing else. And they're lovely people. Don't get me wrong. They're really lovely people, but they chance their arm like we do when we go overseas. So the law is there for a specific reason. There is no grace on this whatsoever. Okay. Doesn't matter if the college is closed. Doesn't matter any of those things. The government have decided. Remember, it's not a work permit. It's an education permit. They're allowed to work in these prescribed times so they can feed themselves and pay their bills. That's the purpose of it. Do not conflate them as a work permit because that's not what they are. Stamp 2 are for people to come here to be educated and they're allowed to work. Now, we all know they're doing Deliveroo's, they're doing Just Eat, they're doing the devil and all. We all know that. That's not our concern. We're not there to police it. We're only there to deal with the law. And the law says, as Siobhan has said, they're the prescribed times. No other time outside of that is permitted.
Brilliant. Another question is, the 12-week renewal grace period, okay? So you have evidence that you submitted the application well in time, and
Yeah,
all of a sudden we're approaching week 12, and some of the questions are, oh, listen, the renewals are taking 3, 4 months.
yeah,
That's rare territory. Once you go past the 12 weeks, that's a hard stop for work, is it not, Dave?
it is. Yeah. And that's the bottom line. And I know people are trying to be kind and they're trying to be accommodating and they think it's unfair that people have to be, but don't take any chances with this, guys. It says 12 weeks. It doesn't say 13, it doesn't say 14, it doesn't say maybe, it doesn't do this Irish grey bit that it'll be grand, it'll be all right. It won't be all right. If you're inspected and you're outside that 12-week grace period, you will be prosecuted. It's that simple. People cannot, you remember, you suspend them until such time. And if we're honest and fair, there has to be some sense of personal responsibility here. These people know when their permits are up. These people know months in advance, and they're leaving it to the last minute, or they're not doing it at all, hoping that, well, sure, look, it'll be grand, everything will be fine. This is Ireland. Sure, no one gets prosecuted. Well, a bad news for you, they do. Last week and every week, people are deported from this country on an airplane at a Dublin airport. Don't kid yourself, guys. This is as serious as cancer. So if they are not, if they're outside the 12-week grace period, you have got to suspend them until such time as you have confirmation that they can work and reside in the state.
Another question, again, to me, it's wing and a prayer territory. You have somebody converting from, they've completed their study, they're converting for a stamp 2 to a stamp 2G, and it's like, oh, can I treat them according to the rules for the stamp they're applying for?
No, no. You can only, so it's a great question again, Sean. Thank you very much. Just looking in black and white terms, guys, you can only deal with the stamp that is current and valid at the time. An application is simply that. It's an application that may be refused. So let's say in good faith, you said, okay, well, look, they're here X amount of years, never been in trouble, everything's honky-dory. They made their application. Let's convert the conditions prior to the stamp or the permit being, that's illegal. You cannot do that. You just cannot do it. You can only work with what you've got when you've got it in front of you. And that's kind of your bottom line. And remember, compliance is all about setting standards and it's all about adhering to those standards. And those of you who are responsible for compliance, I know you're caught between a rock and a hard place. I know you have operations putting you under pressure. I know the clients are putting them under pressure, but you've got to hold the line because no one's going to thank you if your directors end up in court next year and saying, well, that was your job and your job was to ensure that we were compliant because that's your job.
Now, another question for you. To my understanding is that an agency can't sponsor a candidate to work as a temporary agency worker on a client's site in the care sector. That's one of the questions that's come in. Can an agency apply for critical skills for the care sector and only employ them as a temporary agency worker?
It's a great question. There seems to be a little bit of confusion around Section 5.3 of the Act. And my reading of the Act is that yes, you can. Agencies can apply for permits and can be the employer, assuming there's an offer of a contract from a client that meets the criteria, the 2 years and the baseline. So I would respectfully argue that yes, employers give that person my contact details, Siobhan, and ask them to contact. I'd really be curious to get the context here, and I'll come back with an opinion to them on it. But what has changed was, remember, prior to the 2024 Act, agencies were strictly forbidden from holding permits. The 2024 Act would seem to suggest otherwise.
Okay. Now, another great question, and we're going to veer into a bit of GDPR here. So, in terms of a workplace inspection for the employment permits and stamps and that, you have to keep a copy of the candidates, identification documents, their passport, and whatever else. In the context of Irish people, we don't generally do that in terms of proof of ID. However, in the context of Garda vetting, you have to have evidence that they've met the points requirements for Garda vetting. So in that context, can I hold on to an Irish person's
Yes, yes, you can. So remember, the law GDPR is about the legal. So what is the legal requirement for the data? What is the legal requirement to retain that data? What is the legal requirement? In other words, what is the legal justification for having it? There's no legal for justification on the basis that I apply for a job. I don't need an Irish passport to apply for a job. So there's no legal basis to ask me for a passport. You can ask for it on the basis of identity and age, and that's fine, and you can take the details. Once you move into Garda vetting, you're now into a whole different area. This is about vulnerable people and protecting vulnerable people. There is an onus on the agency to ensure that these people are protected. That's the part agencies play. That's the part, the role we play as a trusted partner with the Garda vetting service in particular, that you have the documentation and it is retained. And if it is part of the application process, Siobhan, that you must submit your passport, then yes is the answer. You must retain the data, but you can only retain the data for as long as it's legally required. That's where people are getting caught out on GDPR. So just on GDPR specifically, if you've got files in the basement for the last 10 years, and accountants are notoriously for this. I've gone into companies and they're 20 years, there's boxes in the corner, and I pick out a file and it's 20 years old, and I'd say, explain to me why this is here. And they'd say, actually, you never know. You never know, Dave. I don't know what that means in law, but you never know. And that it's a typical Irish attitude. Jays, you never know. Some idiot's going to walk in the door looking for information. If you have data, guys, beyond the prescribed legal period, delete it, get it out of your office. It's a time bomb. You don't hear banks getting robbed anymore. People are robbing data. That's where the new gold is. That's what they're doing. And agencies are soft touches. We have ransomware demands every week from clients who are getting hacked into, systems and offices getting broken into, filing cabinets not locked, stuff left all over the place. It's all easy money. It's easy money for these guys. And they're selling it on the black web. That's what they're doing. They're getting the data. So someone's coming into your office, for example, you've stuff all over the place, fellas fixing the lights, fellas fixing the air conditioners, fellas fixing the firefighting, and they're taking photographs of all of the data and they're selling it.
Um,
Sorry, a bit of a rant there. Sorry.
oh, no, I think you're 100% right. The agencies carry some of the most sensitive data under GDPR, that being bank details, identifying information, and the actual gold is the PPS data. Um, Now, me as an agency owner and an agency director, okay, if anybody on my staff completely flouts these rules and I get a workplace inspection, I am subject to criminal conviction, am I not?
Say that again, Siobhan, please.
On my staff completely flouts these rules, I
Yeah.
am I'm subject to criminal conviction, am I not?
You're the controlling person, yes.
And then when I go to reapply for my agency license next year and I have a criminal conviction for non-adherence to immigration law, I presume I'm going to lose my license. I presume it's
Well,
not.
it is certainly a factor that the WRC will have to bear in mind, but I think you've answered the question yourself. You know.
Okay. Another point, at the moment, there are workplace inspections happening in agencies across the country. We're having a wave of them at the moment. There is a guide on the WRC website as to how to approach it. But what is the investigating officer from the WRC? What can they ask you for, and what are you obliged to do?
Well, they have more powers than on Garda Síochána. So the first thing they have to do is identify themselves. They'll have a warrant card, which they'll produce. They will tell you the reason for their visit. Always be polite, always be respectful, always be cooperative. Do not tell lies. The first thing to do is never tell a lie because you're going to get caught out because they have extreme power. They can go back 5 years, by the way, in their record search. So if an inspector, at the moment, there's an industry-wide inspection going on, and that's to do, without boring everyone to tears, that's to do with this Karshan Supreme Court ruling and the Domino's case. And what they're looking for is bogus employment. So if you have people in a sector that work for that client for 39 hours, 40 hours every week, the same week, they do the same work, they're directed by the client. They can't subcontract the work. It's not like a plumber. You don't care which plumber comes to your house as long as the leak is fixed. But if you can't subcontract the work, then you are in breach of what's called the Karshan Supreme Court ruling, this test. And that's what they're looking for in particular. So I've had a number of calls. I know the ERF had a number of calls. There are a lot of agencies currently being inspected. Just two people walk in the door unannounced. Always, always, always treat them with respect. These have huge powers, these people. They appreciate the fact that you do acknowledge that. You always call them inspectors, by the way, never call them by their first name. And if you don't have the data, you tell them that you ask them to give them in writing what they're requesting, and then they will give you a timeline to come back to, and you always send the information back. Now, we help a lot of clients with these inspections over the years. And to be fair to the inspectors, they're generally, quite forgiving, providing that you're not a complete cowboy. But again, it's all a great opportunity. Just get your house in order, just to spend a little time on compliance, making sure your contracts are up to date, the auto enrollment is in, the statutory sick pay scheme is in, the domestic abuse, violence leave is in. The law is changing all the time, guys. You need to update. If you're operating on old templates, they're out of date. I can tell you now they're out of date. Paternity leave has changed. Maternity, everything has changed. They need to be updated. These are all express terms that must be in contracts employment. CCTV, you cannot use CCTV in a disciplinary investigation unless it's in the contract. So, it's just an opportunity for people like me to say, look, guys, just take a look at your house, get it in order. It's easy money. You work too hard to give away this money, and it can be substantial and it can cause huge reputational damage to your business. It's simply not worth it. Don't be relying on AI. Don't be relying on AI platforms to do this stuff for you. You need a human being to have oversight of all of this stuff.
So, Dave, this call has been, as you said earlier, as serious as cancer. So if somebody needs your services, they need the services of HR Brief on a retainer basis to review where they're at with regard to each of their legal obligations, how can they contact you?
Just to HR, David at hrbrief.ie. But as always, I just want to say thank you to the ERF for your wonderful support and the work that you guys do on behalf of the sector. I want to wish everyone well in what is a forever changing world. And AI is the new kid on the block. But I do wish as well in what I know is a very challenging environment, and compliance and all these things are other parts of the string to your bow that you've got to be as good at as placing people and getting people employment. So good luck with everything, and thank you very much for your time this morning.
And before we let you go, I have to give a massive shout out to the fantastic team in Contracting Plus. If you're working with professional contractors, make sure you're chatting to the team about how they can support you and your partner list for umbrella and limited companies. And Contracting Plus, don't forget, are the only provider in the market enabling mortgages for contract talent. So if you want to contact Jennifer, if you want to contact Amy, if you want to contact Adrienne, or you want to contact the legend that is Jimmy at Contracting Plus, please go to contractingplus.ie and they'd be delighted to help you. On behalf of the ERF, if there's anything further we can do for you, just let us know. Send an email into Anna at the ERF. And if you have a topic you'd like us to do a talent talk series on, all you have to do is let us know. It's our job to serve your interests as best we can. David, as ever, that was absolutely outstanding. Really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our participants.
Enjoy the weather, guys. Take care. Thank you.